Your relapse just exposed the weakest link in your defense system. If you ignore it, then you'll keep relapsing the same way forever. But if you fix it, then you won't relapse the same way again. My name is Dan, and I used to struggle with addiction for over 10 years. But now I've been clean for 3. And in that time, I've shared my method across many platforms and talked to over 100 guys to help them overcome their problem too. And one thing that I've noticed is that most people treat a relapse as a complete reset. Like they walk around with guilt and shame, they think that all their progress is gone, and then they make half-empty promises to fix the issue. The truth is that a relapse is a system glitch. It's your operative system that is failing under pressure. In this video, I'm going to show you how to find that weak link, patch it, and then walk away stronger so that you never relapse for the same reasons over and over again. Here's the thing, guys. Every single relapse follows the same pattern. You see something that makes you feel something or think about something, and then eventually you do something. Most people focus on the last step, the action of a relapse, and then they just end up beating themselves up over it. But the real break actually happens much earlier, at the weak chain of the link. So picture this, you're lying in bed, you're scrolling on your phone, you see something suggestive, and then your brain starts to think, oh, let us just scroll a little bit more. It's okay, we won't relapse. And then 10 minutes later, you have followed the rationalizations of the addicted mind, and you find yourself to have relapsed. The break didn't happen at the end. It happened the moment you gave your thought a free pass. When you let the addicted system in your brain take over and run its broken rationalizations. So the trigger just started the process in your mind, but there's one thing that you need to realize, that the process can end in the mind too. It's a mental problem, so the battle is in the mind. And once you start seeing relapses as a system failure, instead of just, oh, I'm weak, I'm pathetic, I can't do this, then you can start working on the real issue. Now, a lot of people in this field will tell you that to prevent a relapse, you have to stay away from triggering material. And you know, that's partially true. It's better for you not to be exposed to hyper triggering stuff, but you cannot control everything. So does that mean that you have to live life in such a way where you're just walking around like this? No, guys, I cannot be triggered. No, I have no control. That's not freedom, man. For me, sugar used to be a huge trigger. I would eat sugar and then my mind would go to this place where I was just chasing dopamine, but I cannot keep running away from sugar. I mean, there are birthday parties, there are gatherings, my mom makes amazing cake, and when I have it, I should be able to enjoy it without that leading to a relapse. That's what true recovery is when you can face the triggers, face the urges that follow, and then make the choice not to PMO. If I were to hide away from sugar, then I would just give away my power. You know, I would just hope that life never throws me a curveball. And as you guys know, life will throw you curveballs. So we have established that you cannot run away from triggers. Instead, you have to learn how to face the urges they create correctly and use them as opportunities to rewire your brain. If you want to learn how to do exactly that, I have another video where I go through my urge handling system. I'll put the link in the description below. But the main point here is this, guys. That if you relapse, it means that there's a problem in your processing system. There's a weak link. And if you just leave it at that, then that weak link will keep sabotaging you and keep having you relapse. But if you end up fixing it, then you won't relapse the same way. So the question is, how do you actually find that weak link in your system? You do it with what I call the golden window, which is the first couple of hours after you've had a relapse. Because this is where your brain still remembers every detail, where you were, what happened, how it happened, what you saw, how intense the trigger was, and things of that nature. If you wait too long, then the guilt will start to kind of rewrite the story. It will use rationalizations on why it was okay that it happened and how tomorrow will be different. Remember, there's a part of you that wants to keep relapsing. I've talked about this in previous videos, but I call it the parasite, and the parasite's only purpose is for you to relapse again and again and again, because that's the only way it stays alive. So the longer you wait before you do this process, the fuzzier those details will become, and you'll lose out on some important points. So in this phase that I'm about to show you, your only job is to collect data. Don't start beating yourself up or making big promises of big change that you will do. that won't help anything right now. So what I used to do is that after a relapse, I would sit down with a pen and paper and I would write out when the urge hit, what triggered it, how intense it was, what led to the relapse, and how I felt afterwards. I started doing this on pen and paper, but I later moved that process into a digital system so that I could easier spot patterns and take precise action. That's actually how I ended up building Accountabilio. You can check the top link in the description below. In the relapse module of Accountabilio, the first half is exactly this. You log your urge intensity, your trigger, what led to it, and how you felt. I think of it like being a crash investigator at the scene of an accident. You don't start fixing the car on the side of the road. You document everything first, figure out what made it fail, and then you decide how to repair it. And just like a crash investigator starts noticing certain car models have the same faults over and over again, you can use the analytics page in Accountabilio to spot patterns in your own data. Over time, you'll start seeing which triggers and scenarios that keep breaking you, and that becomes a clear indication of where your weak links are, so you can take decisive action to reinforce them. If you skip this step after a relapse, then chances are that you're not really fixing the problem, but instead you're just guessing. So, once you've collected the data in the golden window, it's time to delve deeper. What I used to do after I fully understood the pattern to my relapse and how I felt about it was to sit down and reflect on what I learned about myself and then build an action plan to fix the root problem permanently. Because here's where most people get it wrong. They think that an action plan is just like, okay, I'm gonna leave my phone in the kitchen at night, I'm gonna delete Instagram for 30 days, some stuff like that, you know? Sure, that might help for a short time, but you're only really covering up the symptoms and not dealing with what caused the relapse in the first place. So an example would be that you relapse because of stress. Then the weak link wouldn't be your excessive phone use, although that is not a good thing. But the weak link would be your inability to handle stress effectively. Another example would be that you relapse because you were on 5 hours of sleep last night and you just felt super tired throughout the day. So the weak link isn't you staying off your phone at night, it's the way your lifestyle treats sleep and recovery as something optional. I have this guy that I'm working with, let's call him Ula. And Ula used to think that his problem was that he was spending too much time on his phone at night. So Ula decided to leave his phone in the kitchen. And that worked for a week until Ula started relapsing on his computer. But when we dug deeper, we found out that the reason he was relapsing is that he would go to bed stressed. And his brain over the years had made this wiring that PMO was the solution to his stress. So it didn't really matter if he was trying to block his access to these websites because his brain would still find a way to PMO. Instead, what we did was to kind of remap his night routine. So he would stop working and answering emails at night, he would start journaling, he would start meditating, and he would start stretching out and just taking a little bit chill. And that helped him. He didn't feel the stress anymore, so his brain didn't really have the need to use PMO to relieve that stress. He, in other words, effectively managed to replace the trigger with a solution. And I've been there too, you know. I used to struggle with sleep and it was simply very difficult for me to handle urges when I was underslept. So it didn't really matter how effective my systems were. It was more that my brain did not have the capacity to use this. So the root problem was my sleep. And the solution wasn't to create a 30-day sleep challenge where you get 8 hours a day or something. No, it was to completely remap how I approach my sleep. This meant rethinking my evenings, my caffeine intake, my lighting, and my training schedule. So sleep was built into the structure of my life and not something that I was trying to force with sheer willpower. That's why the second half of the Accountabilio Relapse module is reflection and action plan. Because once you've managed to identify the core issues through reflecting, your job is not to fight the symptoms, it's to remap your operating system so that the weak link is permanently reinforced. If the diagnosis was in part 1, and the investigation was in part 2, then this part is the surgery. If you follow these 3 steps of diagnosing the system failure, investigating the root cause, and making an action plan to permanently fix it, then you're already ahead of 90% of people who relapse. But I want to give you 2 more points to really effectivize this process. Bonus point number 1 is to keep your commitments anyways. You know, when you relapse, you kind of kill your momentum, and you probably felt this. You were planning to go to the gym, but you relapsed, and now you're making excuses and saying that you'll go tomorrow. I would advise that you go anyway, because if you go, even if it's hard or even if you're half-assing it, you're still teaching your brain to show up when things are difficult, and you'll stop using the relapses as an excuse. Over time, you'll get resilient. Even if you relapse, you still manage to go about and do your chores, and that is saying something about you. Bonus point number 2 is to not let addicted programming win again. What I mean by this is that after a relapse, you have probably noticed this voice in your head talking and telling you that, hey man, it's okay, we already relapsed once, so just might get it over with, you know, because from tomorrow on, we're not gonna relapse again, so just let it do multiple times a day. No man. If you follow this voice, then you'll fail again. Instead, you should fight it and make sure that that one relapse stays one. You prevent it from going from one relapse to a full-time binge. But if you manage to resist even once, then you kind of break that loop. And that is a big win in and of itself. And remember guys, your last relapse isn't the one you avoided, but it's the one you learned from so well that it never happened again. So yeah guys, now I've given you the full method I use post-relapse and the way to implement it. But if you feel like there's some nuances that you want answers to, feel free to go to Accountabilio, sign up, and if you do, you'll get an included one-on-one call with me where we will talk and make a strategy specifically for your needs. But either ways guys, this is what I got for you today. Take care and see you in the next one.